Hey folks, it's Patriot Nurse. Thank you for joining me today. In this video, we're going to discuss the Balkanization of the United States and why it's not such a terrible thing and why we should really look at history before we envision a great and glorious empire for the future. So I've been speaking about the Balkanization of the United States for some time, and many other people have as well, basically because this is the cycle of history. If you're new to the channel, thank you for joining me. I hope you'll subscribe here. On the Patriot Nurse channel, we talk about current events through the lens of history and also what we can do to prepare ourselves to better withstand the next iteration and cycle of it. So the Balkanization of the United States. People have been talking about the breakup of the United States into smaller groups really since its inception. And I think that a lot of people are very, very uncomfortable with this and think that it necessitates civil war or the next iteration of domestic conflict. That doesn't necessarily have to be the case. And I want to share with you the reasons why actually this could be a very, very good thing. So the first thing is we have to recognize this series and circumstances of events that we have inherited. Most people alive today are living in a world whose narrative has been set by the victory of the Allies after World War II. And really the United States inherited the mantle of empire from Great Britain. Great Britain, after it was decimated, particularly the infrastructure and the economic powerhouse that it was decimated after World War II, primarily because of bombing by the German Air Force and destroying its factories and capabilities. The United States basically inherited that same empire and the hegemonic status, basically the winner, the constant winner on the world's platform since then. And what we did was we abandoned, and really you could argue that we did this from the beginning of World War I forward, and some people would say after 1865 forward in the United States, that the United States' federal government abandoned the vision of the Founding Fathers, and in particular the vision of the Revolution, which was built on the Enlightenment and essentially the safeguarding of individuals' rights and the protection of the individual against his government and really against any corporate influence that would seek to derail just and a due process via that government. People, I think a lot of times will conflate and they want to confuse the power of mega corporations with free market capitalism and saying that essentially we have to ignore the level of sway that these super large companies, what would have been the East India Company back in the time of the Revolution, is now effectively Facebook and Google. And so people tend to want to think that these issues have been resolved, and they haven't. When we look at what has happened in the United States since the victory of the Allies over the Axis in World War II, we have done nothing but barrel headlong into the same mistakes that our founders warned about, the mistakes of empire, the mistakes of expansionism, instead of the goal of really neutrality and protectionism, domestic protectionism, that particularly the Anti-Federalists advocated for. Why does Balkanization of the United States come into play, and what should we be aware of? When people speak about Balkanization, a lot of times I think that it comes with it the foregone conclusion that there's going to be a wresting and a fighting to have control over DC. And many parts of the country don't want anything to do with Washington, DC, and many parts of the country don't want anything to do with the federal government. And so really what Balkanization is an attempt to restore the protection of the natural rights of man via government. I mean, why are governments instituted among men if for no other reason than to safeguard his rights, than to safeguard the rights of mankind? And so when the government ceases to be an effective means for protecting the rights of man and instead becomes the greatest active and single oppressor of man and of the citizens, which constitute the government, it therefore becomes the duty and right of the people, in the words of our founding documents, to alter or abolish that form of government. So you have a question here that people want to put forward. Is another round of elections sending more people to DC going to fix the power abuses of the federal government? The answer is overwhelmingly and categorically no, that's not going to happen. So the next best, most peaceful means, of course, is to bring about a convention of states, an Article 5 convention, which of course, again, the internet land and the progressives have invested heavily into poo-pooing. And I would advise you, before you listen to the naysayers of internet land telling you that an Article 5 convention, which is a limited convention, is going to be a runaway convention, that you educate yourself and that you really deeply research the idea. Because when it comes right down to it, folks, the way that things are right now is not going to, it's not going to work. We are too big. The United States is too big, and one central government cannot adequately represent, nor can it safeguard the rights of all of the population. And we're seeing this with everything from the inefficiencies of the federal government to the serial mismanagement of issues, including the border and immigration, to, frankly, the downright corruption and the weaponization of the Department of Justice and of every facet of the federal government. Everything that Washington has its tentacles in is corrupted, it is rotten, and it is cancerous. And if a person wishes to go back to the original vision of the Founding Fathers, the scale and the power of the federal government has to be radically amputated. And the most peaceful means of doing that is obviously a convention of states. I hope that this happens, but if it doesn't, you are going to see a pulling away, a parsing up, and a piecing, carving up of the United States into smaller units. And I personally think that this is actually a good thing. When people throw around the term patriot, you gotta ask yourself, what does this mean? What does it mean to be a patriot? What does it mean to be an American? And I'm sorry, being American is a heck of a lot more than waving your flag of the big winning team in the same way that Manchester United devotees wave their flag because we win, we always win. What does it mean to be an American? It means a lot more than just waving your flag and being on the winning team. It means having a functional understanding of civics. It means having an allegiance to the principles that the Republic was founded on, upon which the Republic was founded. And if your principles dictate that freedom is paramount, you cannot support the perpetuation and the expansionism of the federal government. And really, when we look at what's happening, the voting process that we're undergoing is an exercise in futility. There is no amount of voting anymore that is going to secure any type of curtailment of the abuses of the federal government. That's not going to happen. So if you don't think that playing within their system is going to yield you better results than playing outside of their system or trying to rein them in legally and peaceably via the Article 5 Convention is your best bet. But in that case, inertia, if that doesn't work, inertia is going to take over, and we are going to see the United States be carved up. On one hand, this is going to bring in a new level and a degree of uncertainty. This could be brought about by supply shortages, by domestic upheaval, certainly by supply line disruptions and a crisis in confidence. It could also be caused by a currency crisis. And if you needed any more reassurance that the federal government is incapable of policing itself, and also that it is incapable and has been an utter and abysmal failure at safeguarding the rights of the individual, look at what happened to this country in 1913. Everything from the Federal Reserve taking over power, wresting it from Congress to print money, and then a heavy progressive income tax. The way that things are, the ability of this federal government to wield the weapon of empire in World Wars I and II, and Korea, and Vietnam, and Gulf War, and Iraq, and Afghanistan, all of this war for empire has been built upon theft of income and wages from the United States citizenry. And it all started in the early 1900s. Without the gas of income tax in the car, this federal government does not run. They collected record income tax last year. More money that they have stolen from people under the threat of incarceration and seizure of assets. They have stolen a record amount of money from the American people when the American people have already given enough. Since I have been a teenager, since I was a teenager, this nation has been at war. This is the longest that we've been at war in our nation's history. You can't sustain this. We're not going to sustain this. Eventually, the same issues which brought about the revolution are going to manifest again. When you consider, though, how this is going to impact the world, when we fall from our consolidated power structure and the hegemony of the United States begins to wane, you're going to see the upstart powers, China and Russia, try and come back and wield it. So for this reason, you hear a lot of people, particularly in the retiree and older category and age bracket, say the United States is a force for good in the world, and if we don't exercise that, somebody else. Well, my question is, what happened before 1913? Do you think that this nation somehow was less allegiant to its principles before we started being a force for good in the world? No. Define a force for good. If being a force for good is going and invading sovereign countries and getting the nation further in debt and enslaving and mortgaging the labor of our children, that's not what it means to be an American. If Balkanization, meaning the country breaks up into smaller units, better safeguards the rights of people closer to the Constitution, then that's what's necessary in order to really be an American. And I don't think people are really ready to wrestle with that. Really uncomfortable for people. So the nature and flow of things is always towards either globalization or decentralization. So basically power is either on a swing of consolidation versus balkanization. And we have been consolidating for a while. But certainly with the election of Joe Biden and the absolute train wreck of the federal government's administration under him and his administration, we're on the contraction stage. So eventually we're going to break up. I don't know how it's going to be. It could be peaceable. That is the best bet. It could be non-peaceable, but whatever the eventuality is, you're going to be better suited to withstand this if your basics are met. And if you have not only supplies stored up, but your skills, beans, bolts, and band-aids. History is replete with examples of how people who were prepared were ridiculed as being prognosticators of doom, or like the crazy ones or the eccentric ones. But my rationale is better years too early than a day too late. So I would rather you invest in yourself now, invest in your self-sufficiency, in not only your self-defense, not only food security, but also in your medical needs, because none of these things matter if your people are too sick to defend what's theirs, or if your people are too sick to be able to go out and earn, or go out and farm and go out and do whatever. Your ability to take care of people is paramount. So let me encourage you, if you haven't made training a priority, make sure and do that this year, even if it's not with me. If you do want to train with me, I've got some options for you. You can train with me online. I've got courses. I'll be launching a new course, Lord willing, here within the next few months on herbal. Right now, I have an option for you to train with me online in the Foundations of Medical Prep. It's 4 hours, $129. That link is down below if you want to train with me in person. Got a couple more options for this year: Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Keller, Texas. Going to be unveiling the 2023 schedule, Lord willing, next year, and also planning to debut a new course next year as well. So you can check that full schedule out at the website, thepatriotnurse.com. But friends, let me encourage you not to engage in denial with where we're at right now in history. Denial and pointing the finger at the screen and saying you're crazy, you're stupid, you're anti-American, that's not going to help you at all. It's going to better suit you if you embrace where we're at, if you're honest about the problem and you do the work to take care of your family, because this thing is coming. It's just a matter of time. I can't tell you whether or not it's going to be in the immediate future or the intermediate future, but it is coming. This is the nature of history. The United States is not going to endure forever as the consolidated hegemonic power that it has been for most of our lifetime. And a student of history will understand this, own this, and look at how he can best prepare himself for the next chapter of history being made. I hope it was helpful for y'all. I hope you have a very blessed weekend. For now, it's Patriot Nurse signing off, and I'll see y'all later. Bye.